Morning, my name's Hugh Miles. I'm a member of the St John's community with my wife Emma and our children Owen and Alice, and it's great to be able to share some reflections on Psalm 37 this morning, which if you haven't already read, I'd encourage you to hit pause. It's quite a long psalm and it really deserves some attention and digestion before we come to it in more detail. So if that's something you've done, hit play again and we'll kick off. So there are some well-known verses in this passage that you no doubt will be familiar with, and it would be very tempting to just settle on a few nice verses or even some particularly challenging verses. But of course the psalm demands to be read as a whole. It is after all a poem. It's a piece of wisdom writing that would look more at home in the book of Proverbs than it does in the book of Psalms. Notice that unlike any other psalm, the psalmist doesn't address God. None of the ones we've looked at so far lack an address to God. There's no offering of praise, there's no cry of lament. We are the intended recipients of this message, which is a message of wisdom set out in the form of an acrostic poem. Now, for those of us who don't benefit from being able to speak or read Hebrew, the acrostic form of the poem is somewhat lost. But what actually comes across really plainly in any language is the psalmist's use of contrast and repetition to drive home the key message. And I think the key message is that the life lived God's way will ultimately be rewarded with an inheritance, even if in the here and now evil is seen to prosper. So most of the psalm is taken up with examples of the righteous life versus the unrighteous life. On the one hand, the unrighteous do wrong. They carry out wicked schemes. They plot against the righteous. They commit murder. They lack generosity. They live unscrupulously. The psalmist doesn't deny the fact that they sometimes succeed and even prosper, although the psalm points out the fleeting nature of such success, which we're ultimately told will be followed by death, destruction, condemnation. On the other hand, the righteous life is characterized by meekness and commitment to God, taking delight in Him, living with patience and hope, practicing generosity, upholding justice, demonstrating that all-encompassing moral quality of goodness. But perhaps above all else, the righteous are those who simply entrust themselves into the Lord's care. Perhaps if you're anything like me, on first glance, you look at this psalm and it seems as though there's a good versus evil dichotomy, and it somewhat jars with our experience of reality. Perhaps you know someone who isn't a Christian who exhibits more patience or generosity than you do. Similarly, if you're anything like me, you'll be acutely aware of your own imperfections and sinfulness. But on closer inspection, this psalm presents a view of righteousness that's entirely consistent with Scripture as a whole. Yes, the moral qualities set out in this psalm are necessary and inevitable consequences of a life lived in close relationship with God. But the principal quality is trust, faith, simply committing oneself into the care of the Lord. The Scripture repeatedly affirms that the key that unlocks righteousness is this trust, this faith. Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. And as Paul reminds us, it's by grace you've been saved, through faith, and this not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. So if living a righteous life is about trusting in God and living His way, what's the result? Well, we read the result is a reward, a vindication, a blessing. But one word more than any other pops up over and over in this psalm, and it's inheritance. And we're told, moreover, that this inheritance concerns land. The righteous will inherit the land. Verse 9, verse 11, verse 18, verse 22, verse 29, verse 34. And it does seem likely that the author and original audience of this poem would have viewed this inheritance as a literal inheritance of land. But the Hebrew word here translated as land can equally mean earth, as can the Greek equivalent that Jesus uses when he makes the most direct quotation of this psalm in the New Testament, incorporating its central theme into his Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Of course, we now view the promises of Psalm 37 as being applicable to us, and the inheritance of land or of the earth as our future participation in God's amazing new world. He's going to completely remake heaven and earth, and where the two meet, we will spend eternity with him, restored to the image of God. joining him in his perfect governance of all the good things that he's made. He hits reset. Society, life, existence starts again in the absence of evil. So to summarise, I think knowing that he will one day make all things right, knowing that we will inherit a place in his eternal kingdom, frees us. It enables us. As we trust in him, we can live a righteous life, even amidst the evil and suffering that's all too evident in this world. So when I think about how we can apply this psalm to our lives today, I guess we need to simply listen to its instruction, remind ourselves of the eternal perspective that we so easily lose sight of, encourage ourselves to persevere through good times and bad times, given the hope and promise of an eternal inheritance. Spur one another on towards love and good deeds, even when they're not reciprocated. So I pray that we would be reminded today to spend our days under the Lord's care and know that our inheritance will endure forever. And I'll just conclude with the words of verses 5 and 6 of this psalm. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun.